Lord, we give thanks for your spirit that's gathered us and named us and claimed us. Help us be good neighbors for one another, as Jesus commanded. May we be a gift for this community and a light for the world in this season of Epiphany. Amen. Hey, welcome. I'm glad for the good response and for you guys coming out. Lindora and I have been talking about this for a while. Lindora's our speaker tonight, but she's an active part of our congregation, and she could introduce herself and tell you her story. But we've been talking about doing something like this within the congregation, and then larger, and then and it kind of gelled into this 3 weeks. And Lindora and I worked on some goals that we wanted to accomplish. And those are right here at the beginning. One thing I thought was just important was that we just listen. And so most of these 3 weeks are going to be people telling their stories. And I encourage you to ask questions and clarify and everything else in the midst. But most of it's going to be people telling their stories about where they left. Reasons that they left, and what it was like to come and be here. I know for myself personally, I'm always I have just nothing but awesome wonder at people that can pick up their lives and move it, and having traveled briefly in my life. And so in short amounts, be in times where I don't know the culture and I don't know the language, and that being uncomfortable, and suddenly find yourself a whole block of people that expect you to know the culture and the language, and living in just Michigan and Ohio all my life, and then living someplace so foreign and strange. And so everyone who immigrates in my mind is like a courageous hero, just to be able to do that. I was disturbed. All the people at our southern border, there's not enough space for them, and they were sleeping on the streets in El Paso. And one of the commentators that I overheard that was running at my father-in-law's place, they were laughing that these people weren't, that they had to sleep outside, that it wasn't, that it was some sort of joke, and whereas it just broke my heart. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I just think that it's remarkable to me. So just listening and hearing stories is good for us. So that's going to be the bulk of what we do. And then the purpose we're here to hear those stories and is hopefully it builds in us ways to be better. And when I say neighbors, usually we're talking about neighbors is how we talk about how we're going to love each other, right? And because from the Great Commandment. So that's and that's usually how I mean the word when I use it in church. But honestly, I just mean neighbors at this point. I mean just these next door neighbors. Paige and I just moved into a new development in Pickerington, and it is crazy diverse with people that have immigrated from all sorts of parts of our world. Literally within sight of my house, there are 5 different immigrant families from different parts of the world. Like I can stand on my porch and see. And I told Lindora this embarrassing, awkward story that I won't retell you about how I tried to knock on the door and say hi, and then proceeded to say something stupid, and then followed it up with something else stupid, and then my wife yelled at me and said, "Gosh, I can't believe you're such an idiot," and so it was a whole thing, and so just how do we good neighbors? So that's what I'll be listening for, and that's what I hope you'll be listening for, And then the final one comes from Suzanne Schmant that we've been talking about, specifically with the Ukrainian refugee situation that was happening, but just in a broader way. What sort of ministry are we able to do? And that our gifts, right? That's what we're where do our gifts meet God's needs? So we'll keep our ears open for that, and maybe that'll be part of the discussion and questions that we'll have, and maybe ideas from our different speakers. You're going to meet the speakers over the 3 weeks, so I won't introduce the others now. Lindora is going to introduce herself here in a minute. And again, many of you know Lindora because she's a very active part of our congregation. And then Buwan, who was here about 5 years ago, has agreed to come back, and you can read his bio there. He's a leader in the Nepalese community, and he's going to share. And then Matthew Cowner, he's the only one I'm not. Matthew Cowner, I believe, and Suzanne can help me with this. Matthew Cowner is a part of Peace Lutheran in Gehenna that's working with the Ukrainian ministry, the good Ukrainian ministry that they've set up, correct? Okay, so he's not Ukrainian. Okay, it didn't sound like he was, but I was just clarifying that. And he's been working with, and I've been working with him to set this up, and he's going to bring some Ukrainian family to talk with us and to be part of this group that day, and also share what Peace is doing over there, Peace in Gehenna, north of us here. So that's me. Lindora and I will be here the next 2 weeks. Lindora working with me as a moderator and bringing up questions and concerns and helping shape the conversation. So you'll see us return as we go forward here. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Lindora. Do you have your microphone?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think.
Where is it? Oh, it's a lapel. It's not an over the ear.
No, I didn't go for that one.
Oh, I didn't even know we had choices, Lindora. They don't give me choices.
Good evening, everyone. It's so exciting to see so many of you here today, and I'm glad you all are here. Well, I'm here to tell a story, and I want this to be as conversational as possible. Feel free to ask questions. And I've done, for those of you who've come in, we have some brochures. My name is Lindora Koluhawadiawara. I will tell you more about myself later, but as Pastor Carl indicated, I'm a member of this church. I've been here since 2016 and been trying to get to know some of you gradually. It's been like a snowball, and hopefully as we go along, I'll get to know more people as time goes by. But I did a small presentation. I said to Pastor Carl, talking is good, but I also like pictures. The more visual, I think it also helps to tell the story. So Matt is going to help me as we go through, but as you can see up there, it says Messiah Lutheran Church's weekly seminar on the theme, Welcoming Our Neighbors. So that's my country's flag. I'll tell you which country I'm from, but my country is kind of modeled after the US in a way. It's a big story there. I wouldn't go into that now, but I'll tell a little about it. Next page, please. So who am I? Okay. I'm a wife. I'm a sister. I'm the eldest of 4 sisters, and I'm a daughter. Both parents passed, but I have many fathers and mothers around the world, and I'm family-oriented. I'm a mother of 3. I have 2 girls and a boy. Some of you may know them. And I'm a women's rights and peace activist, also a development activist, more into pushing against violence, talking about peace, talking about the importance of mental development, communal development, and whatnot, simply because I'm from a country that experienced 14 years of civil war. I was at the age of 13. But I experienced that war. I became a change agent in that environment, and I've carried a torch since then. So in the field, in terms of my work, I have at least 20 years working at a very young age from high school. I got involved with peace work. I'm an African immigrant, now an American. I got my papers this year. Very proud of that. And I'm a member of Messiah Lutheran Church. Thanks for being welcoming. I've been here since 2016. Next page, please. The short version of where I'm from Africa. At some point, I had, the first map I had was all dark with the 54 countries. There are some people in my experience that think Africa is just one country, but it's a continent, 54 different countries. And interestingly, I thought, let me use this map. Because when people, a lot of times people who don't know about Africa, when they hear about Africa, they think of all the negatives. But Africa is a very rich continent, which if you delve deep into, you also understand why colonial masters fought over partitioning and whatnot. It's a continent that's rich with many minerals: iron ore, timber, diamond, gold, just copper, so many things. But yet, the people of Africa are so poor. There's been wars, basic social services, access to those is a challenge. Having gone through war as a young woman, I think things can be different. So I'm an activist, and I say to people, yeah, things are bad, but we have the power to make it right. So as part of my own calling, which I think I engage as much as possible, I've been very much engaged in my country, Liberia, which is the oldest African nation in Africa, founded by free slaves from the United States of America. Liberia was found as a home for free slaves. They settled, they named the country Liberia, meaning the land of the free. Our constitution, our flags were all modeled after the US. The seal of our country says the love of liberty brought us here. Because of that, as proud as they were to have found that home, there became tension because they did to the indigenous what slave masters did to them. So over years and years, things piled up, and that took us to war that stayed for up to 14 years. And so the legacies of negatives and so forth. So Liberia is a small country, over 5 million people right now, 15 counties, 3 neighbors. We sit right there by the Atlantic Ocean. So I'm from Liberia, West Africa, and I'm married to a Malian. And in Mali, once you are married to a Malian, it's considered that you automatically become one. I don't have my passport yet, but I'm considered Malian. So, next page, please. How did I get here? I talked about war. I'm not going to go into my experience of the war, but I literally experienced the 14 years of war. In high school, I became a change agent, learning about peace, how to promote peace within the school culture because of the issues of violence within the school environment. I became a peer mediator and going, became a trainer, working with women, working with teachers, community members, and had the opportunity to travel the world. And all of what I did, at some point I moved to, I figured in my life at some point I needed to make a change. And so I had an opportunity to get another job, and I moved to Mali. That's where I was and working until I went, as usual, just searching, researching online, just looking for things that I wasn't specifically looking for, and I came across an opportunity to come to the United States to do my master's. So as a peace builder, building and development practitioner with at least 50 years in the field then, I saw the opportunity, the University of Notre Dame. They were basically calling on individuals from around the world, from conflict zones, who would come to the US, get educated, get additional skills to go back to their home countries and improve situations. So I came here with that in mind. I left my job, left my husband and kids back in Mali, and came to a 2-year program. By the time I came, 1 month later, my husband's job transferred him. They moved. 1 year later, they were about to move. And I said, we can't keep going like this. Many of you know Alex and Yogi Jeffy. That's my aunt. My mother came after her. And she said, well, because she could see that I was stressed. My husband was moving about with his job and the kids behind him, and that couldn't continue for me. So she said, well, just bring them over. I'm like, no, because that would change my story. And it sure did, because she insisted, and it came over to the US. So while I was at Indiana and Notre Dame, they were here with Yogi, and that changed my plan, because the plan was to come, get my graduate studies certificate or diploma and go back home to do more of the things that I love doing. So now I had to think about something else. So the kids were here, and then the priority shifted to them. Because if you compare the access to opportunities in terms of educational system and everything, we had to weigh the options. My husband is working out of the country. He's also a development practitioner working with international organizations. He's out there, so we made the decision to sacrifice that. I'll stay here with the kids, with my family support. So that I started doing. So I got this scholarship, came over, the kids came, my husband has been back and forth, and since 2016, like I said, I've been a member of Messiah. Messiah has open arms to me, and I think I like it here. Next page, please. Has integration been easy? Not at all. Not at all. First of all, finding a job. The job that I do, you find a lot of jobs in places like DC, Atlanta, Washington, New York. And so coming to a smaller area like Ohio was different, because I tell people peace building, they're like, what's that? If I tell people in DC peace building or development, people would know outrightly what that is. So I had challenges trying to blend in, find that job. And I heard voices from a lot of relatives, others, and they told me, well, why not go do nursing? Why not go do this? I said, I can just switch careers like that? No, I can't. So I tried, and it took me a while, and I finally found a job with an American organization based out of Portland, Mercy Corps. And I was assigned to the field office as program manager to run their Women Empowerment and Peace Building program in Mali. Coincidentally, it also worked out well because my husband worked in Mali. So I moved back to Mali with my family. But as many of these organizations do, they're mostly reliant on donor funding. So funding ran out. And it was also challenging finding another job there. It was taking time, and the kids' school, we had challenges with that, so we decided, let's take them back to the US. So I moved back after a year, 6 months. Came back, had to get insurance, went to get to Amazon, did like 2 years, and things became complicated. I couldn't continue because I felt I didn't belong there. But at the same time, I was more curious about learning from their model, because one of the things from my grad study was a product of that work was the establishment of a foundation. For those of you who don't have, I'll share more copies in the end. It's called the Business for Peace Community Development Foundation. I spent my time at Notre Dame thinking about what I had done in the field in terms of my work, what I could do that would be different, what I could do that will help others become better at creating an environment that will somehow minimize crisis, conflicts, violence. And so I spent much of my time thinking through that, and I decided that the best way to contribute to that cause is to create a foundation where I could go back and continue to work with women, girls, those are the main targets, but also other community members. So since 2015, I've been working on that. So I've basically not worked since 2020 because I was at Amazon, and while at work, Yogi and Alex had retired and moved back home. which complicated things because I was the only one home with my kids. Then I would call home, my girls are either sleeping and my son is gone somewhere and they have no idea where he was, so I had to quit my job. So I stayed home and decided, well, I will be my own boss. So I've been home and working at just pushing things forward with the foundation, doing other things in the community. And so, but it's been ready. My family, the church, friends, Liberian community here have been very, very supportive. I'm glad Janine is here. She has been our volunteer CPA, working with us to make sure that we have our books in line. Thank you so much, Janine, very much appreciate that. Next page, please. So as I talk about my experience here in America, it's been very difficult to integrate because before I came in with my job, like I said, I did a lot of travels. I came to the US several times. I did not like it. Most times it was in DC or New York. I always said to people, I don't like America, it's too fast. So I would come to meetings 1 week and boom, I'm out. So I never really had the time to interact with family members or engage with them. But my time at Notre Dame and visiting family members and talking to them, I felt that there were lots and lots of issues that were unheard of from the other side of the world because everyone thinks that America is a little heaven. And so it had me thinking, and because of that, I decided I shouldn't be sitting here and thinking about going back home to just work with people in Africa to deal with critical issues when those very issues are here. So as part of our foundation work is to also target immigrants, women, girls here, and see how we can support them. But at the broader scale, do more work back there because there are less opportunities on the continent, and see how we can mobilize more support and arouse people's interest to do more in terms of supporting what's going on back there. So I've had to unlearn things, get to know more about the American culture. The way we run nonprofits in Africa is also a little different from here. A lot of things are similar, but it's also a little different. Our way of living in the community is different. I was saying to Pastor Carl, even just living and not knowing your neighbor, it just seemed that there's a kind of unspoken stress. People are not very open to just meeting their neighbors. And I found that difficult, it was challenging for me. And then for us immigrants, we come and we think that because we think this is little heaven, and we see about all we hear and see about we see and hear about the gun violence around, that kind of scares us, some of the things we hear about, so people rather stay in their corners. So I think having this kind of exchange, listening to different stories and just talking about our experiences really is helpful. I was saying to Pastor Carl, not just for you all who may not be immigrants, even though all of us have that connection or some kind of story somewhere, but also for us who are here and meeting a lot of you, and we also need to understand how to engage because we're not sure. Sometimes I say to myself, is it okay if I just go and knock? What would they think? Sometimes people write stuff on the doors. They don't want to be bothered. Some people write different things. And like, okay, maybe I should just stay in my corner. So I'm also not sure. Just as others are not sure how to engage someone like me, I'm also not sure. So it's there's two sides of that coin. So we all need to learn from each other. So what have I been doing? I've talked about the foundation. Thinking through things, working, maintaining my networks in Africa, not just in Liberia, calling people regularly, what's going on, what has changed, what do we need to do here, sharing that information with people here, there's social media, so a lot of the people who have not had the opportunity to go back home, they think it's all about politics, so they see what's on social media and say that's it. And I'm the one saying to them, no, I did a lot of work with civil society. There's a lot more that happens on the ground. It's not like this, it's not like that. This is what's happening. I'm in touch with this person. So I've also been involved with trying to share the good sides to what's happening. I've also been very much involved at staying at home, and some people, like someone have said to me, well, you're more busy than anyone who works. And I say, yeah, I'm my own boss, so I do whatever. I think sometimes my husband thinks I'm crazy. Jenny says I have, 17 hats? I'm always looking for something new to do, and that's how I think I keep myself sane. Otherwise, being a professional, just shifting the cap and coming to be a housewife or mom, That's, so I've been so busy. So I have the black hair there with the light in there. I've been doing a lot of online programs. Between 2021 and 2022, I've acquired 5 different certificates, entrepreneurship, with the state, just looking for opportunities. So I do short courses, I learn things, and everything that I'm trying to learn is geared towards making me better or preparing me for engaging through my foundation. Because one of the things we want to do here, for example, is to work with immigrant women to become self-reliant. A lot of times women depend on men, that's the culture. And so when they come here, how do they find ways to be self-sustainable, self-reliant, get involved with entrepreneurship, start their own businesses so that they don't just work. I have families, I have relatives, friends who work 2, 3 jobs. They hardly sleep. And I say to people, you're going to just fall off someday. You can't continue. Let's talk about other ways. So I'm hoping to create more spaces where women can just talk about their experiences and find ways to support each other, where we all become more self-reliant and continue to get, and do more work within the communities. Because they work like that, they are hardly engaged in the community work. Someone told me, I said, it's a cycle, it has to break off. And someone said, well, I don't worry about that. And I said, when do you think that cycle is going to break? She said, when I die. And I said, well, that's what you think about yourself, but are you thinking about your children? You are working, your children are doing something else. You don't have that time with them. So it's important. So I've been keeping my brain alert. There's a jar there. I'm also the CEO of Yasby Ventures, LLC, a business that I named in honor of my mother. As crazy as I am, my mother was also crazy into so many different things, and I thought, there are sauces that we have in the Liberian community that's not on the market. People love it. It's not difficult to make, but I hear people saying, oh, it's been 30 years, I haven't had that. And I say, you have all of the ingredients right here. Why 30? Why not 1? Why not months? So I'm like, okay, I think there's an opportunity here. So I'm going to put it on the market. So I've been working at developing that. So I have different sauces. I'm making snacks. And I'm trying to grow a business in honor of my mother that will also be connected somehow to some kind of agribusiness thing that we will also do as part of the foundation. I have my beautiful family there, my husband, my 3 kids. As part of the foundation in 2020, we got a small grant from the city through United Way to support with the census. So my idea was, let's mobilize hard-to-reach communities, specifically targeting Malians, because I also speak a little bit of French, and also the Liberian community, to encourage them to be counted. And I was just shocked. The first thing, I know the Malian culture, they're mostly Muslims. I know back home, they do things separately, the men and the women, but I never thought that having a Malian association here would be separate. And I reached out to the president. He says to me, yeah, you're talking about targeting women, but the association is all men. And I said, that's not an association. Where are the women? Oh, they have their own group. So it was difficult getting them. We got a few of them, but we ended up in the Liberian community, some of whom thought that, well, like one leader asked me, why should we get involved with the census? And that's a community leader. And I said, why? You stay here, your kids are here, you work, you pay taxes, and you don't want to have a say in how tax funds are distributed, in what happens. It's important. So I had to work with others to educate people on the importance of getting involved. So we had that opportunity. There's a picture there also about a Never Again campaign. When I worked in Liberia, we did a 3-year nonviolence campaign with women across the country. We protested against the war. And thankfully, with the support of the church and other civil society actors, we called on the international community to come in, and we had the intervention force. We had the United Nations mission in Liberia, and our war ended, and we elected the first female president in Africa after 150 years. When we did that after President Sirleaf's inauguration, we did a campaign called the Never Again, that we didn't want to see guns in our communities. We didn't want to go back to war. Unfortunately, we haven't gone back to full-blown war, but everything else changed to something else, and there are still a lot of challenges. There's also a picture of the women there during the time we did picketing, holding leaders accountable, legislators, ministers, saying to them, we have a peace agreement, you have to follow it. You have to respect it. Otherwise, you're not going to sleep. We're not going to let you sleep. So we mounted so much pressure, and I just like that kind of work. Engaging in community and seeing how you use people's power to change things. So these are some of the things I've been involved with, and also continuing on the next page, here in Columbus, Matt. Yeah, so sorry, the other picture is not so good, but we contributed. The Liberian community was doing some COVID campaign, reaching out, giving out food to people through the foundation. We're able to not just volunteer, but also give us some financial contribution to like organize like a Zoom meeting for senior citizens, just to get them to come together and exchange in a different way, but also contribute towards purchasing some food items to share within the community. And we've been working to get more partners and support for our work, also been joining other membership groups. And we also had the opportunity to get some COVID-19 supplies from from the state, the city, to share out like masks, sanitizers and stuff. So we shared that with different groups in the community, including some mosques and other community groups, churches and whatnot. So these are some of the things I've been busy with. Next slide, please. Looking forward. I'm looking forward with much hope. I think the last couple of years since I came in has been a period, it's been a good trajectory, it's been a good period of learning for me. And I think I've got better connections now. I've learned not so much to stop, but I've learned enough to now get into action, as opposed to thinking, talking, and do more action. So I want to do more in getting connected to you all, to other people in the community, to other nonprofit groups, build partnerships along those lines. I want to share my story and get more people to support the foundation's mission, because it is, I think it's a worthy cause. Some people don't know about this story. Some people don't know why it's important to support others back there, or even support immigrants in a different way here. I want to seize every opportunity to continue learning and build bridges. And this year, I'm excited because we're going to officially launch the foundation in Liberia. We're going to launch the foundation in Liberia. We've been authorized to begin operations in New York. So hopefully we're going to work on opening a small office there. It's going to be mostly for fundraising and partnership building. We're also going to open our office in New York. As we grow back, we just finished our strategic plan. We're working on a fundraising plan. And then just do more to support networks and partners and supporters across the U.S. and the African diaspora. Thank you. And I will now pause for questions. Yes, Pastor Carl.
Yeah, if you could, Lindora, could you describe what the childhood was like in the midst of war in Liberia, and just what Liberia looks like when you were growing up? Probably, I know it's helpful for me to hear how how the world's changed, from here to Blackville, where you live now.
My childhood experience?
Yeah, just get
Well, I grew up in... Yeah, I grew up in a very big family. I have very big extended family, and a family dominated by women. Maybe out of every 10 women, you will find one man. And so the women are like the leaders in the family. They are the tough ones in the family. And so I grew up in that kind of family. And when I was born, my mother handed me over to Yogi and said, "This is your daughter." And at some point, she took me in, and so I was with her. And then when she came over to the U.S., I ended up going to another relative. So I stayed with that relative for a few months, and then it was challenging getting me to school. I attended the St. Peter's Lutheran School. It was challenging getting to school, but one of my uncles, his house was the big family house. There were more students from Lutheran school, so she thought it wise to take me there so I would go to school with the others who were older. So I moved to my uncle's house, and that's where I stayed until the war came. So the war came, and then we had to move from one point to the other, because every time you moved and you think things would change, there would be new attacks. So we kept moving around the country, And at some point, a cousin of mine eventually moved out, went to another West African country, Burkina Faso, stayed there for some time, moved back. But that's how my childhood was. I never really stayed with like a mother and father. My mother wasn't like married. She was married to someone else who wasn't my father specifically. And like I said, she handed me over to Yogi. So just growing up in a home and not having that motherly or fatherly love, I didn't have that. So for a long time, I didn't feel that. And living in a home with sometimes 20 persons, obviously it's not easy to find that love that you're looking for. So I think I also grew up learning to be very independent, doing certain things my own way and whatnot. But one of the things in our home was that my aunt and my uncle and his wife, they were very much strong Christians. So they would make us go to prayer services every single night except for Sundays. So we spent time in the church. I grew up also learning to sing in the choir. So I did singing in the choir and so forth. So I spent a lot of my childhood also in the choir. At some point when I became a teenager, I was active in the youth ministry, doing scripture unions, doing a lot of things. So that kind of followed me to at least at some point, because when my uncle and his wife passed and everybody started going off on their own, the whole regular prayer service, things started shifting. So the cultural changes and all of that. So yeah, so that's what my family life was. Like I said, I'm the eldest of three. I never really had the time to stay with my mother. So we didn't really have like a very close relationship, but she was always in my life. She would always visit like every month, come and bring something. She was always there, present somehow. So I knew her, we didn't have that time to talk closely. But at some point I felt glad, because before her death, at some point before I moved here, I took her to Mali and she stayed with us for 3 months. So we got the time it was a good time to bond. She got to know her grandchildren. It was really fun. And unfortunately, she passed 2 years ago. And, but yeah, in a way, that's what my childhood was. I was fortunate also during the war. A lot of my friends, horrible things happened to them, but I was protected somehow. Always in a good family setting where we looked out for each other. So there was no harm that came to me. So I'm always grateful. And I say to many people that I think God spared me for some reason. Yeah. Okay.
The other thing is, I remember talk a little bit about what you were doing. You ended up eventually in Mali, I know, but you were doing work in different countries in Africa before you ended up Mali, and then took the Notre Dame thing. And yeah, so
I worked with an organization called the West Africa Network for Peace Building. That's an organization that was also founded or co-founded by another Liberian who experienced the war. In fact, he had a child died in his arms because of hunger. He was running away because there was some attack, and he saw that this child had been left alone. He rushed, and it's like that child was hungry and thirsty, and there was no food around. He left the child, went around, and all he could find was popcorn. By the time he came back and started stuffing that popcorn in the child's mouth, he didn't even realize that the child had died. So then and there, he promised to work for peace, that should not continue to happen to the children of Liberia. So out of that feeling, that shift for him, he co-created this organization. Is now one of the biggest, it's the biggest West African peace building network in the region. It's in all 15 countries in West Africa, and they're very active. So I started off with them as a volunteer, and then started working with the women's decks. My boss then is because of the work we did together and the kind of international attention that work got through the media and so forth. She, along with the president and another person, Tawakkol Karman of Iran, they got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011. So she left to come to the US to study. I had to walk up in her shoes. So being one of the youngest in the group, she said to me, Lindora, I'm leaving you in charge of these women. I said, who? Not me. I said to her, Lema, no, I can't do this. She said, yes, you can. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And she had this big meeting and called all the women and said, well, I'm leaving. I'm going to do my master's in the US, and I need someone to leave in charge. And everyone went Lindora, and so I was forced. There was no way to run away from that. So I had to manage a network of over 3,000 women across the country, plus 25 staff. Being the youngest on the team, how was that going to happen? So it took us a while, but I managed through that, and then eventually got promoted to the coordinator. Then I became the national network coordinator of the organization and not just the program. And through that effort, we did a lot of work in the region. That work took me to many countries in Africa, in Europe, across the US, and different places. And so just talking about what we're doing on the ground in terms of advocating for peace, what we're doing on the ground in terms of women empowerment, training women, working with them to find their own voices, to use it positively for peace, and so forth. So it was a lot of work just across the country. During elections, we had to make sure that it was violence-free. Outside of elections, we had to make sure that our leaders did the right things. Otherwise, we were involved with policy advocacy, direct advocacy to those people at community level, working on issues of sexual and gender-based violence, FGM issues because of the culture. There are female genital mutilation issues. When that period comes, girls are taken out of schools. I even hear right now it's even worse. They're not even consulting parents. They are kidnapping children and taking them to the bush schools for whatever reason. So it's just been so we're just firefighting after some time doing all that work. At the same time, managing the overall network, we had at least 23 organization members. So 3,000 women across the country, at least 25 staff, a network of 25 organizations, just balancing all of that. And at the same time, being the youngest on the leadership team, and they, not just being young, but a female, the board thought they could push me around at some point, and I just got tired. I said, I'm tired fighting, I'm getting out. And so even though for a long time my husband was out of the country, and he said to me, leave, I said, I'm not leaving Liberia. You know the kind of work I do. The only way I'll leave if you find me a job. That was the way of telling him off. But he didn't find that job, and I never left. But when I got really burnt out, I thought I needed something different. And that's when I moved to Mali. I got a job with a Dutch foundation. So I was there working as regional program officer for Liberia. So even though I worked in Mali, I was always going back to Liberia to work on the Liberia program and not on the Mali program. So I've done a lot of nonprofit work in that sense with others in the region. I've done a lot of training, active nonviolence and peace education. I've done a lot, trained teachers. One other interesting experience was where I went to train teachers, and I saw my third grade teacher. And he looked at me and laughed and said, what is she doing here? Who are you going to teach? And I felt so nervous because this is my third grade teacher and I'm going to be the trainer. So he he didn't take me seriously. We went through the training, and he came and he shook my hands and he said, well done. So through all of those experiences, I became stronger, and I liked more and more what I did. Going through college, through the university, I always wanted to be a medical doctor at the high school level. But with my first peace building training, I said to myself, I don't want to see blood. I don't want to see blood. I'm not going to give no one injections. I think I found my calling. And so from high school, I kind of shifted and never looked back. So that's my story. More questions?
Where is Mali?
Pardon?
Where is Mali?
Mali is in West Africa also. Yeah, it's a country in West Africa, and it's bigger than Liberia. I was saying to Pastor Carl, like Mali is so big that you can have 5 Liberias out of that.
Is it near Cameroon?
No, it's not near Cameroon. Yeah, but it's further up. Cameroon is closer to Nigeria, for example. Yeah, yeah. But it's mostly they're mostly Muslims there. It's also a francophone country. So Africa is kind of divided according to the colonial masters that were there. So you have the francophones, the anglophones, the Portuguese. So you have those languages across the continent. Yeah. Any other question? Yes.
What's the education like? You have to pay for it there in Liberia? And does it go to 12th grade? Or?
It goes all the way to the university. So there are master programs there. But going through the university, it was quite challenging because, for example, when I graduated from high school, I went to the university in search of a guidance counselor because I was struggling between figuring out whether I wanted to become a peace builder or a medical doctor. So I started off in science college, and with all the trainings and programs I was involved with, I kept saying to myself, that's not the right thing. And so I thought maybe I should speak to a guidance counselor. So I went looking for a guidance counselor, and someone looked at me and laughed and said, why are you looking for a guidance counselor? In this university, the last person I ever did, serve that position was your sister. That was before the war, so you may as well go back to her. So I'm like, okay. So after high school, I got a job. I started to work as a student aide before I started school. So that gave me the opportunity to get to know the system. And so I was working and going to school, and my first salary was $3. That couldn't do anything. So it was so funny that I would just say, okay, this is just my lunch. But eventually I just said, whatever I make here, I would use that to also keep it and have my sisters go to school. So I kept that, augmented whatever other money I had, and had my other sister, because they were up in the village with my mother. So I said to I went to town, to the village one day. I said to Ente Yogi, I'm taking Kebe with me. She's called Kebe. And she said, okay. Kebe said she wanted to go. I said, I'm taking her. Why? I said, I'm the first of 4. If I'm the only one educated, I'm going to take on all the burden. So they need to follow, and all of us will have to work together. So I took her to Liberia, to Monrovia, and then she started going to school. But I stayed in school. It's difficult. You hardly have books. So there's a library with old books. They're sometimes just to be busy. Sometimes maybe an instructor will give you some assignments, and they tell you, go and find that book in the library. You go there, you can find it. You have to go all around looking for it. Or there's a place under the Ministry of Education where they sell books. You have to go and buy a book or borrow from someone, photocopy that, and read. It's just challenging. But, and then now it's even worse because a lot of teachers, they're not so much invested in teaching. They're just doing it for the money. So a lot of them are teaching in different universities. They have teaching assistants that fill in for them. And so everybody literally have to do work on their own. I hear recently the university started some online programs. People don't even have internet. And they're talking about online programming. But we hope that things can change because the university is old. In the 70s, there were international students studying in Liberia. In the 70s, Liberia was the second in the world that had access to rubber. Firestone companies there. It was really booming. So a lot of internationals went to Liberia in the 70s. And then after the war, everything just went down. But there are still things happening. I went through that educational system. For a 4-year program, I spent 9 years. Why? Because there were just too many disruptions. Every time we went to school, there was some attack. We had to stop. So after 3-4 semesters, we resumed. So by the time I graduated, it was just time because my brain was reaching the point where I couldn't think anymore. So I graduated after 9 years. But through it all, continuing to work, was having my babies at the same time, and here I am.
Is your country still at war?
No, the war ended in 2003. So active war, no. Inactive war, yes. There's still a lot of issues of corruption, violence. Recently, there's been terrible things happening. This year is elections year. And so politically, the country is getting charged. And so a lot of other things happening. We still don't have electricity in many places, but the government is trying. Running water in some parts, no running water in some parts. But yeah, things are still, it's tough, but people are still moving on. People are very resilient. Yeah. Yeah.
What large companies are in Liberia? Like, for instance, Intel is now here in Ohio trying to create jobs for Ohioans. Who is coming to Liberia to create jobs for Liberia?
Well, we have the Chinese. Of course, they're everywhere. They come and start doing roads, and the next thing they're mining gold or diamonds and what have you. So they're there doing their thing. We also have another company called ArcelorMittal. They are there in the north. We have the mountains there, so they are mining iron ore. There's another company in India that's also there trying to mine some iron ore. But because of the bad government politics and corruption, it's more about giving these companies more opportunities to get whatever they can get and very little go to the people. So the individual leaders think more about themselves. So right now, as we speak, there's even a tension in one of the areas in the western area where this company is there and mining iron ore, but there are no roads. They even hired a foreign company to go in to do some work. They don't even have an office there. They're working outside of the space. So there's a lot of tension right now. So yeah, you have those companies, but they're mostly people involved with mining, gold, diamond, timber, yeah, the mineral resources. Not really great opportunities, and the Firestone Company is there. In 1927, they got a 100-year contract from the government, I think for like 15 or 10 cents per acre. And they're still there. They take all of the rubber. We don't have not one rubber company or factory. So they bring their rubbers out, they make the tires, and we buy it, that kind of thing. So it's a cycle, continues to grow. They have schools. At some point, when President Ellen Sirleaf, the first female president, when she was president, she visited, had to compel them to rebuild the homes of the workers because they were all like real slave homes. You had to bend down before even entering. The children didn't have enough opportunities for school. The services were just so bad. She just insisted that you need to redo this or get out. So they did what they could do. They revised the contract and, of course, extended it. So they're still there. Yes.
It's been great hearing your story.
Thank you.
Congratulations on becoming American. But
Thank
as
you.
an immigrant, what was your hardest thing coming to the United States, and what do you look back on as a really good experience?
The hardest thing was leaving my kids behind, as my son was 1 year, 3 months. I applied for the fellowship. In fact, I sent the application to my husband and said, oh, look at what I found. There's this scholarship opportunities. Oh, well, just apply because they're not going to tell you, no, that's just you. And I said, no, but I can take 2 years. No, I'm not going to do that. Leave my kids. And he said, well, so he encouraged me to do that. And I finally did it. And boom, I got accepted. And I said, now here we go. I didn't want to do this. You made me do it now. I've been accepted. I don't want to go. And he said, no, this is a huge opportunity. Like they say, opportunity comes but once, so you have to go. So just leaving my husband, knowing that he's not the type that's home and taking care of the kids and all of that, just leaving him with my 2 daughters and my son that was 1 year, 3 months, that was so hard. It was so hard. So coming the few weeks, it was really hard. But in the end, I said to myself, my kids know I came to study. If I fail, they're going to ask me what happened, Mama, because they're not going to think about how I feel. So I may as well just do what I got to do. And it was also very welcoming because I was in a program that had 22 persons from 19 countries. So it was multicultural, some from West Africa as well. So we all bonded so well for the 2 years, and that helped a lot. So I wasn't like isolated or anything. We're always in group doing things together and whatnot. So that was really good. And then after school, having not worked for 2 years, coming now to face the real world because schooling is over with, I have to find a job. And like I indicated, finding a job in my career, on my career path, is not something that's easy in a place like Ohio. So then my husband said, well, we have to move to DC. And I said, DC is so, I don't like fast cities. And besides, family members are far apart. Here I have Auntie Yogi, I have Uncle Jeff, if I want to go somewhere, they can be there. But in DC, who's going to be there? You out of the country, or you come and find a job and you're working, I'm working, and who's going to be there with them? I said, no. I'd rather stay with, my close-knit family here than go somewhere else. So we argued about that, and eventually he gave up. So then I had to find a job. That was proving tough. And so when I found a job to go to Mali, that was okay. But when I had to come back, another reality set in. Because I came back, and not long, Yogi and Jeff had to leave. So I was the only one at home because my husband is out of the country. So it's been like on and off, but I found a way to hang on. And just thinking about not being on the job market, as someone very active, every time I call home with those that I've worked with, and they're saying, the first thing is, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? We need you here. We're praying for you. We need you here. This thing is happening, and that thing is happening. So I don't even remember how much I've spent on calling cards. So it's been so difficult just being told those things, because I see that need to just want to just run back. But it's also, I just say to myself, well, my kids are the priority for the time being. I can still do what from a distance, the little things that I'm doing. So with the launch of the foundation, hopefully it's going to take us through to another level. And then I'm hoping that with having gotten my papers, I can eventually send for my sisters. It'll take some time, but I say to them, while I'm working on your papers, play the lottery. You never know. Yeah, so it's been tough just thinking, and people who know me and the work I've done, they're like, what are you doing in Ohio? At some point I said to one of my former bosses, you know what, I'm hibernating. And I think it's good, but I think too that in a way when I look back, and like I was saying to Pastor Carl, I felt challenged because I came to go back. That was the whole plan. When I couldn't go back and I had to recreate or do something that would keep my brain alive or keep me sane, just looking back has been a challenge, because there are people who want to continue engaging with me, who wants me to continue, especially at the community level. Women that I've worked with who think that I can do more there, and I've tried. I've literally gone home almost every year or every 2 years, so that has helped. I've maintained that network. So when I go home, it's like I'm visiting these women. They're praying for me. I'm doing things here. It's just boom, 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 and then out. Boom, 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 and then out. So, but I'm looking forward to this next level, because it's just a challenge, just dropping everything and looking to a new direction. But when I see my kids, they are growing so fast, taller than I am now, my girls. And I said, well, we're getting there. So it's just a matter of time.
Lindora, what's their experience been like in America? Because they hadn't been here as much as you had, I assume. So this was a pretty new experience for them a few years ago.
Yeah, it was. And then the fact that we brought them, and at first when I brought them, then they started getting used to the place. In fact, we lived in an apartment. And when it came time, when I got the job, they didn't want to leave. They said, we don't want to leave. And I said, well, you saw that out with your dad, but I'm going. Because I had to go to start work, and he had to come later. So, but they didn't want to leave. Then I took them to Africa, and then with my job ended there, they didn't want to come back. So yeah, so one of the things that I've learned is that with kids, they're very flexible. It's easy to balance out. So initially it was worrisome, but they didn't want to come back, and I said, well, sorry, but I'm taking you, and when you are grown, you can make your own decisions. So for time being, I'm the boss. We are going back. So I brought them, and they haven't gone back since. Yeah, so, but it's been good. They now have friends, and they every time they hear us talk about, okay, maybe we should start planning now to move to DC, and they're like, we are not going. So Fatu wants to graduate from Licking Heights. She doesn't want to leave. Rookie comes after her 2 years after, and she's like, I don't want to leave. Fatu says, okay, I will go to OSU, or I might go to OSU, but I'm not staying on campus. I will come home, so you have to be home. And I said, well, that's for later. So they're also finding their feet. getting to know some friends. They don't want to leave their friends now. So the story is changing in different directions, but we'll cross that bridge at some point. Yeah, but it's been also mixed for them. And as children, they wouldn't talk too much about all of their experiences, but yeah, at some point they have indicated that they didn't want to go, but we had to do what we had to do.
Any more questions for Lindora? I want to honor our time. So it's 7:02 right now,
Yep.
according to my watch.
But thank you so much. Still have more.
We are. I will say this: for as far as Messiah goes, Lindora and I have talked, and then a few others in the congregation. We are one of Yogi's dreams was for us to be part of a ministry in her home village in Liberia, Yela. Did I say it right?
Yeah,
Oh,
got it.
So what we're hoping to do, and Lindora and some of the other groups, some of the other people of this church, we're going to get together in February and talk about how we can be in ministry with the ALA. And my hope is that we would bring a small group of people from Messiah to Liberia and to Yela and there's a Lutheran church that we've already sent some Bibles to once, and we want to continue to help and serve and be served, right?
Yeah, the Lutherans over time has done, there were a lot of Lutheran missionaries in the country before, so we have hospitals that were built by them and so forth, so the country has a strong Lutheran connection as well, so.
What is the main language spoken in Liberia?
English, but we have the Liberian Pidgin, we call it the Liberian English, so. Yeah, but it's English and we have different dialects. Yeah, but the official is English.
Anybody else? Janine?
What is the best Liberian restaurant?
In town?
In town?
Yeah.
At my house? Yeah, that's a good question because so yeah, no, but it's true. At my house, Yar and my other cousin, I said to them, "You work too hard. Let's start a business." So I pushed them into starting a business. So yeah, so but basically in terms of Liberian restaurants here, it's a shame, but you don't have like a Liberian restaurant. The Liberian president has a restaurant, but he's married to someone from the Caribbean, and so she's not so much at it. They struggle with that, but we don't have one. And I say to all of the women, it's a shame. But yet, a lot of the Liberian women cook, but at home. Cook and sell at home. And I say, listen, one of the lessons that I've learned is that it is unlawful to cook at home. So through my foundation, we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship, business development. Let's talk about what we need to do to get out of our homes. There are people looking for Liberian food, and there aren't Liberian restaurants. So another opportunity.
How big is the community? Liberian community in Columbus?
Well, according to the president, we are approaching like 15,000 in Columbus. They haven't, what I've seen is that they haven't like done like a specific survey in terms of collecting numbers, but they've over time gotten names of people that will come and register, so they have a list of people. There are a lot of people. We usually do like festivals during the year. Independence Day celebration, we have what we call the Cultural Fusion Festival, and people like that because there are a lot of games and so forth, so thousands of Liberians will show up and then disappear. So that's a day that we'll see a lot of them, and then from time to time, from different events, people pop in there. And but yeah, that's the numbers growing.
Yeah, I know Alex had a few large events here.
Yeah, the numbers growing.
In his leadership. Okay, I'm going to have to honor people's time, so I'm going to end it there.
Thank you so much.
And Lindora will be back next week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And thanks for everybody that was online with us today, too. We'll see you next week.